Yo, what's going on, guys? You got your boy AA on 220 here, bringing you guys the WBE Week 8 playoff push for this season of WBE. Now, I know that I mentioned that last week we were going to have a playoff push starting off, but because of the way that the graphics were handled, I didn't end up getting the PSDs to edit them until around Thursday or Friday. And by that point, not really many matches had been played anyway, and knowing that a lot of coaches weren't going to be playing their matches on time this week, it made more sense to just wait and do it coming into Week 8. Because one, that would obviously be on time instead of 3 or 4 days late, and two, the games aren't going to be much different anyway. So you guys will still sort of see pretty much the same video you would have last week, besides a few people's seedings will be slightly changed. In terms of who's in playoffs, it doesn't really change that much again either way. So yeah, without further ado, let's just get right into it. Remember to leave a like down below if you enjoy this video, and comment who you expect to make playoffs first, who you expect to make it in at like the last second as a sort of surprise pick, and anything else relating to the playoffs you might have. So I'm going to be covering the Shield Division, Kreselke will be covering the Sword Division, and yeah, let's just get right into it. So for standings for the Shield Division, we have Envy leading the pack with 7-1 plus 22, followed by Gator with 7-1 plus 16. And then we have a bunch of 5-2 coaches with Under the Radar, we have 6-Foot Hacks, and also Game Boy Luke. Then followed by our 4-3 coaches who take out the last 2 seeds, being Patty Trills and Galactic Elliot. Now, in terms of the rest of the coaches, we have a lot of really close records, and there are still a lot of coaches who can obviously still make playoffs. We have Cybertron at 4-4, who is still just under the playoff seeding right now. We also have Feint Attacks at 3-4, of course. We have Jodor at 3-5, Old Man Tup at 2-6, Mewtwo fan Nate at 2-6, the Uzi Gunner at 2-6, and Kyle A, who has never lost, at 0-8. So the seedings are pretty close. I'm pretty sure that everyone besides Kyle is still in playoff contention, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure everyone is still in contention at this point. It would just be dependent, like obviously, for example, Uzi would most likely need to win out the rest of his games to have a chance, as that would put him at 7-6. So it doesn't really seem that unlikely, as a lot of the coaches above him are only like 2 wins above him. It seems really unlikely for Kyle at this point, because he would be at 5-8, and I'd be shocked at this point with how many games and coaches that are at X5, X4 would then lose enough games to be worse record than Kyle, especially when a lot of these coaches could end up playing each other for the last few weeks. So it seems a little bit unlikely, of course, that that will be the situation, but we'll have to see. For all I know, maybe Kyle wins out with massive differential, and there's something that I overlooked, but who knows. Now, in terms of our top coaches, we have Envy and Gator, who look like they might clinch in a week or two, depending on how games go, of course. I would be shocked if by next week we don't at least see something back in terms of if they've clinched or not. But it does look like that maybe they could bomb just enough to where they just miss playoffs, who knows. But their records are pretty phenomenal, so for you Envy and Gator fans out there, you should feel pretty safe with your coaches doing well this season. Now, in terms of the upcoming matches, there was one match I really wanted to highlight this week in terms of the matchup, and it has a massive implication on current playoff seedings, that being the Sin City Scizors versus the Atlanta Umbreons. So this is the Feint Attacks versus Patty Trills game, and it has decent implications as of right now for playoffs, considering Patty is the 6th seed as of right now at 4-3, and Feint Attacks is currently the 9th seed at 3-4, with their differentials being not overly far from each other, to where this game could totally decide who would move into playoffs and who would move out of playoffs, especially depending on what happens with their Week 8 games when they do get played. So, in terms of this matchup, we see the 2 Psychic Megas facing off between Mega Gardevoir and Mega Alakazam, 2 very destructive Megas that have such phenomenal special wall-breaking capabilities. Gardevoir obviously is a much bulkier Mega compared to Mega Zam, and Mega Zam just has blistering fast speed. On Feint Attack's roster, we follow that up with Dragonite, Entei, Flygon, Durant, Lantern, Fortress, Meloetta, Tornadus Eye, and Regirock. So a lot of Dragon spam between the Dragonite and the Flygon, 2 4x Ice Peak Dragons. We also have another just offensive option through things like Entei. We have the Durant. So a very nice offensive roster, of course, for Feint, with some nice hazard stacking through Fortress, and also Cuss-type Regirock, of course. So 2 Cuss-type options for hazards. Very nice. Though I'm not sure how much it'll matter, because despite the fact that Patty does have a couple Rock Weak bonds through things such as the, actually I'll go over Patty's full roster first before I get into that. So Patty's full roster is Mega Alakazam, Lando T, Ferrothorn, Incineroar, Druddigon, Primeape, Ribombee, Golbat, Seismitoad, and Raichu. So While Feint, of course, does have 2 custom Berry Hazard mons that can obviously help him set hazards to no end against Patty's roster, I'm not sure how much it'll end up actually mattering, because Patty, for one, has 2 really good defoggers, being Lando T and Golbat. I think Rabombi also might get defogged, but I'm really blanking right now, and even if it did, it's not exactly a good defogger to begin with. But Lando T and Golbat are both very terrifying defog mons, in my opinion. They can pressure a lot in terms of Golbat being just pressuring for defensively, not being able to be broken by a ton of mons, and Lando T, of course, making a lot of things fear it setting up, and then with that in mind, Lando T can maybe pull off a defog last second. Mega Zam also isn't bothered by hazards, so despite Feint having these 2 really good cut stat mons, I don't think it'll matter as much as it looks like it might on paper, just based on weaknesses through, let's say, Ferrothorn getting spike stacked in general, because that will help a lot through not taking as much from hazards, because of course it would shoot a rocks damage hit, because that's only 6% for Ferrothorn. And even then, Incineroar, if he got max hazards up against him, Patty would be taking around half with that, because of it being rock weak while also being grounded. But at the same time, I don't think it'll matter that much, because outside of those 2 mons, I'd argue that hazards don't necessarily matter a ton in this game, because Rabombi will probably be a suicide lead. As mentioned, Zam does get Magic Guard, and Golbat and Lando T can both easily clear hazards, while a lot of the team could just come in once, set up, and then do a ton of damage against Feint. At the same time, though, Feint, of course, can use hazards to his advantage, and maybe, let's say, have Wish through Gardevoir, and recover up a lot of his fatter mons to maybe outlive Patty's team, to where hazards might actually have a bigger implication in this matchup. Not only that, but both of these teams have some decent pivot mons. Patty, of course, has the Lando T and Incineroar, which are phenomenal pivot mons, and also Golbat and Rabombi that are some still decent pivot mons, and then Raichu could, of course, maybe come this game, but Raichu, in my opinion, doesn't have that good of a matchup. Between Lantern and Flygon both being very nice electric sponges, I would argue that Raichu is a horrible matchup this game. In terms of Feint's roster, he also has some good momentum. Not as good as Patty's, but he still has some nice momentum. Between the Lantern and the Flygon, that's very nice momentum for Feint, while also having Meloetta and Torrent Eye, of course, that are both very good. So they both have some really nice momentum going for them. So this will be a very back and forth game. Probably a lot of switch heaviness in my opinion. And it'll really just be about who, I guess, breaks the other person's team first. As both of these teams could definitely not only try and outlast each other, but they could also hazard stack. They could also just try and break with offensive mons such as their Psychic Megas and their offensive grounds. So it's a pretty parallel game. I mean, they both have some pretty similar aspects to their teams. They both have steel types and spikes and rocks. They both have 4 times weak ice ground mons. They both have offensive Psychic Megas. There's a lot of parallels, actually, if you really look at it. But in general, I think this will be a very fun game to watch for the fans. I'm personally looking forward to this game a lot, especially since it's, of course, a Patty Chills game. You know I gotta stay out for that. But not only that, it's also a game that will, of course, as I mentioned, have massive implications on playoff standings, as Feint could actually get into playoff potential as of this week, should he beat Patty. Of course, that also depends on if he wins his Week 8 game, but we know so little about those games. It's very hard to judge Week 9 games when we don't even know the standings after Week 8, of course, because Patty, for all I know, could bubble out of playoff contention after, well, not bubble out, but miss out on playoff contention going into Week 9 based on what happens with his game versus Leo. And Feint could, of course, also end up just making it so where even if he won this game 6-0, he just wouldn't be in playoff contention based on his game versus Kelly. So, on paper, as of the standings right now, this would be arguably the most important game to watch out for if you guys are a fan next week. And maybe, let's say, only have time to watch one game. Though, of course, I encourage you guys all to watch as many games as possible, as it does, of course, not only help the coaches out, but it helps you guys stay more involved with the season, know who's really deserving of playoffs, who maybe just had a bad start based on who they played, and can still bounce back, of course, based on potential versus other coaches. And in general, it's just a fun experience for the fans. So, otherwise, I think that there's a lot that could be left to this matchup based on the coaches and how they play their seasons, but I don't want to give away too much of the matchup because obviously, for one, I don't want to give away too much to Patty's opponent when I'm helping Patty build for potential sets, but 2, I also don't want to maybe give away a lot of Feint strategies to Patty as of right now, because I'd rather just this game, of course, be a very fun game for both coaches, and I don't want either of them maybe just basing their ideas off this one video. So I'd rather just leave the rest of the fans, but it seems in general, though, this will be a pretty even matchup, and I'm looking forward to it 100%. So if you guys enjoyed Playoff Push this week, make sure to leave a like down below. Check out all the coaches linked in the description below. It's been your boy AA2 for 20, and I'm signing out. Until next week, guys, hopefully you guys have a fantastic day, and peace out, guys.